Chuck Schumer.
No. Speaker tonight is Carol Bailey, and she is very active in the New York Grange, or New York State Grange. She is a Grange historian and museum curator working out of, what'd you tell me, Cortland?
That's where the museum is.
Okay, there's a museum, and she's inviting us to come and visit. Okay, so this sounds very good. I think you're all probably aware that where you're sitting right now served for a time as the Grange Hall in Fabius. So how many people can come and hear a talk on the Grange and sit in an old-time Grange Hall? Here we are. Carol's going to talk about the founding of the Grange, women's role in that, some of the founders, some of the little-known facts about this. As all of you know, agriculture has advanced in terms of how people do things. And as I was telling Carol, back in high school, I decided I wanted to work on a farm and for the summer. And so I was able to make arrangements with a relative of mine whose neighbor needed a hired man. And so in 1952, I worked on a farm. And for you people that know how to put up hay, it took, back then, when I was helping, it took 5 men to work the field part of it. One driver for the thing. The baler had wires that they would stick through and tie up somehow, and then there'd be 2 people on the wagon. And then by the time you got back to the barn, they'd invited a lot more people to come in to lift those heavy bales and put them where they belong. So all of that, and as you know, you can now do that job with many, many fewer people. So the Grange has various aspects. One of them is worried about the legislation and trying to get for the farmers the best legislation. There's also an education component. There's working with younger people, teaching them, getting them to think about how meetings operate, getting them to give talks like I'm trying to do now. And so it's a tremendously useful and important thing. And so Carol, tell us all about this and take us back in history if you need.
Thank you, Chuck. Yes, was talking to him, I said you should come down to Cortland and see the Grange Museum. We are open by appointment only, as if you are acquainted with museums, you know how hard it is to have volunteers. And so I said we are open by appointment, and I told him that we were thinking about having an open house next April, which happens to be Grange, always is Grange month. So I'll keep you posted. We're right off of Route 13, so you won't get lost. Yes, I've been involved in Grange since 1952, no, probably before that, a couple of years maybe. And I know all about doing the hay. I've lived on a farm my entire life, so I know there isn't much happens on a farm that I haven't been involved with or done. So, I'm from Wayne County, and I said I'm the one that all the historians go to when they want to know something about farming or agriculture, just because I live on a farm. So, but I will get going on, I didn't knock it off. I don't know, but I bet you can hear me anyways. I don't know, it's not working.
Can't hear you as well as we'd like to, so let's...
Okay, we'll see, you see if you can figure it out, I don't know.
Well, you're asking the wrong person.
Technology is wonderful.
Please, ma'am. Okay, I'll try that. Going right up here, so, okay, one of those. Kelly and or I shouldn't say most, but a lot of those other men, all were involved with the federal government in one capacity or another. They were work for different bureaus. But Kelly was asked to travel to the South after the Civil War by President Johnson. Being a Mason helped him to gain entrance to the farms and homes in the South because people were not too excited about Northerners yet. In 1868 or so, or actually it was before that, 1866 or 67. And because he was a Mason and that kind of gained him entrance, he wore his Masonic pin, so that got him in sometimes. He thought a fraternity of agricultural interests would bring the people of the North and South together. So that is where the idea of Grange sort of started. And he came back, and of course he knew these other men through his government work, and that he got the idea rolling and didn't have much success. If any of you have been involved in trying to start any kind of a group or organization, you know it doesn't usually go with a bang. And so he did not have a lot of luck early on. He met up with William Saunders came to...
Hold that thought 1 second, we're gonna try.
Okay, to see if McDowell. And McDowell was instrumental in not only providing a little financial help, but encouragement as well. And when Kelly came this way in 1868, he stopped and visited with McDowell, tried to start a Grange in Penn, which did not happen. So McDowell gave him some money to get him going again. His home was actually in Minnesota, so he was heading towards home. But he stopped in Fredonia, New York, and there he did manage to form a Grange, and that is Fredonia number 1. So that was the first one. And they celebrated their 150th anniversary last April, and I was fortunate enough to be there to see that. They had quite the day. They actually started celebrating on Friday night and continued through Saturday and Saturday evening, so it was a great day. McDowell, who I said was from New York, Francis McDowell, he served as treasurer of the National Grange for 20 years. And he was the first high priest of Demeter, who oversees the ritual, is responsible for the 7th or the highest degree of the order. Our present one is Bruce Croucher, who happens to be from Clifton Springs in Ontario County. And he's only the second one from New York. We have 4 degrees in the local Grange, like Fabius Grange. There would have been 4 degrees before you became a full member. And they are all related to the seasons and to agriculture. The 5th, or Pomona, is the county degree. The 6th, or Flora, is the state degree. And the 7th is Ceres, which is the national degree. So you see the Pomona, Flora, and Ceres are all names of graces in mythology. And I said, you had some things out, and she wanted me to point out what they were. So this is a good place to do it, right here in where I'm talking about the degrees of the Grange. These are the staffs that are used, and when you come up, look at this, because that shows how a Grange Hall is set up. And we are still set up that same basic way. I'll start with this one is the steward. It is spud, and it represents going along and eradicating the bad things that happen, trying to keep everything calm and quiet. This one is the gatekeeper. He's supposed to be wide awake, keep watchful eyes so that nobody gets in who shouldn't, which is way off base now because we are not a secret organization, which they were originally. This one is the assistant stewards. It is a pruning hook or a spear beaten into a pruning hook to represent peace. And that is a shepherd's crook, which the lady assistant would carry. So that is, you know, a shepherd's crook is out with the sheep and all of that. So that's what those are. This is, you know what that is? You call your meetings to order. There's always a Bible on the altar. And that up there almost looked like an altar. I don't know if it was the Grange altar or not. This looks like it could have been the station, and maybe it is. If she says it is. I don't know which office, but, and this is a cloth that would have been on the master station. If you, it says master up there. I don't know what the other one says. Does that one have something?
That's just got the,
Oh, the name
This
of
Maybe
that.
I meant the altar cloth.
That would have been the altar cloth. So those are some of the things that...
Carol, what are the,
Oh, these?
Yes.
Okay. This is one of the sashes. This would have been a woman's sash. F stands for Fora. They would have sat in the front. They are worn like this. They haven't changed too much in the last...
100 years.
Yeah, I was going to say 100 years. The original ones were white and red. But you'll see up here, shows the graces up here in gowns and the rest of the officers sitting around. So, some of them were, this one is from a Grange in my county, just a little pin. This is the lady assistants, would have been on their sash, maybe. That one says master on it, so, and I said these are just pins and name tags that I've accumulated. I am a 7th degree member, have been since 1956, I guess. Each of the lessons teaches something. And the degrees, they like faith, hope, perseverance, and on and on. And I always say, women were included from the very beginning. We were the first equal rights fraternity, actually probably the first equal rights organization. Women were allowed in, they could hold any office, and they could speak their mind, which wasn't allowed always. In some places, I'll put it that way. Children from 5 to 14 were welcomed, starting in about 1880. The Junior Grange was formed, and they were allowed. Their meeting follows ours, only geared more to children, and they have a lot of activities. Some of the things they do is parliamentary procedure. They learn to run a meeting. They do crafts. They have community service. They attend camp. They have contests. And they learn respect for God and country. I said I was telling him about the legislation a little bit. And I kind of break it down into various things, subjects. And being that Grange was originally a farm and rural organization, although I always say anybody could join, and they did. I said, you look at my own Grange, and there's a lot of people in the early years that were not farmers. Agriculture has always been a part of the legislative department, and they urged raising the Department of Agriculture to cabinet status because it was not always that way. I encouraged farm research and the experiment stations. We were a big pusher of experiment stations, and helped to establish the extension service and vocational agriculture. You asked me about that in the schools. I said it's rare to find a vocational agriculture class in schools anymore. They're primarily in the BOCES or Voc Pro or whatever they call the county now. They do have some there. I know in our own they are not, none of them say agriculture in them. They're environment and power mechanics or something of that sort, and various other names. They don't really say agriculture, but they are geared to that. We were the proponents of rural free delivery. So when you walk, if you live in the country and walk out to get your mail, we thank the Grange, because we were the ones who pushed for it, and it finally happened in 1896 or thereabouts. Was the first. Health care, we still work on that. We're interested in trying to keep or get better rural health. I said some of us have to drive a number of miles to a hospital. I said we used to have probably four or five hospitals in our county. In fact, the town I live in, which has a population of around 6,000, including the rural area, had 2 hospitals. We have none now. And we have 1 hospital in the whole county. I said, fortunately, Lyons is close enough. You can drive to Rochester in a little over an hour to get to a hospital up there. But we are still working on that. We are very interested in that. Rural electrification came about too, because Grange pushed for that for many years before it was really got going. And we've had other things that we've worked on, a better use of the land grant colleges such as Cornell, direct election of U.S. senators. How many of you knew that they were not always, you didn't always go in and vote for a U.S. senator? Yeah, you didn't used to do that. That changed in 1913, and that's when you started. Otherwise, the state got you your senator, whether you liked it or not. You had no choice in the matter. Pure Food and Drug Act, and inclusion of farmers in Social Security. When that originally began, farmers were not included. So, yeah, over there. Didn't know that, huh? So, other accomplishments. Trade unions. Members work together to purchase goods at a cheaper rate. Monroe County had one of the first. The Grangers and Granges came together and they started buying their supplies, not household stuff as well as agricultural equipment and grains and feed and stuff. They went together and did it cooperatively, and because they could purchase a big quantity, they got it at a cheaper price. That one in Monroe eventually covered 21 counties in the central western area. They sold seeds, wagons, reapers, plows, paint, lumber, coal, groceries, clothing, wallpaper, even organs. Then they got some Grange stores going. They're lesser known, but they were, I don't know if any of you ever heard of them, but there was one in Little Falls, one in Syracuse, and one in Herkimer. And they could buy, because the 3 of them went together, they bought stuff at a lower price. And some of the other stores did not like that too well in those towns. Because they did sell to the general public as well as the Grangers. Now, I don't know whether they charged the general public a little more or not. Insurance. How many of you have fire insurance? Some of you might have, or your parents or somebody might have had it through the fire relief associations that were formed by Granges back in the 1870s, 80s. I said most of them do not go by fire relief associations anymore. They've changed their name, like the one in Wayne County is Wayne Cooperative Insurance now. but it was originally a fire relief association. And they also did not like horse thieves, imagine that. And they used to have, what do I want to say, a bounty on horse thieves. Grange just had bounties on those. So if you were a horse thief, you better look out. There was a Grange there. Then along came the cooperatives. New York State Grange Purchasing Agency was formed in 1913. Probably most of you have never heard of that. Then in 1918 was the Grange Exchange. They sold feed, fertilizer, silos, limestone, among other things. And then came GLF. How many of you ever heard of that? Yeah, a lot of them. That was incorporated June 25th, 1920. They were around a long time and it became Agway, and eventually that was run into the ground, I think. I don't think there's much of Agway left anymore. The charter said to engage in and conduct business not only in New York but in adjacent regions and throughout the territory in possessions of the United States and elsewhere. So they can branch out quite a ways. They sold feed, fertilizer, flour, seeds, and fuels. The stores sold merchandise for the rural communities, and it became Agway in 1960. Probably a lot of you know it as Agway too. Some of the social and educational aspects of Grange are we provided an opportunity for like-minded people to associate. Entertainment, back in the early years, late 1800s, early 1900s, no TV, no radio, wasn't too much going on for entertainment. So Grange provided some of that. At their meetings, they had plays and skits, games, dances, dinners. How many of you have been to a Grange dance? Yeah, there's a few hands, me included. I think I've danced at every Grange Hall in Wayne County. And education was fostered through programs that included reports of farm and home, sharing of information, and speakers. And we do that today. We still have speakers, we still share information. And Grange was one of the first to have libraries. I said there was no public libraries until later years in most towns. I said, like Fabius, you wouldn't have had a library here in the 1880s. And Grange started libraries, and they were really quite successul. I said they bought the books for sharing with members, and they were often the first public libraries within a town. And I said, I know in Wayne County, two different Granges, my own included, at one point in the probably 1890s or so, they had rail excursion by rail to Niagara Falls for money for the library. And I said, they made enough money on one of those excursions to keep the library going for 2 or 3 years. So they were really profitable at that time to do that. Opportunity for women. As I said, we were the first organization that allowed women in on equal footing with a man, and gave them a chance to visit with each other, and they brought their mending or needlework. Some of them still do it today. I said my best friend, she frequently takes her crocheting with her. Not me, I can't do that sort of thing. They're also known for being very good cooks, but I'm not one of them. I pretend not to cook, or try to. I explained some of the things I brought up there. I don't know if there's anything else I didn't mention the song books. I have, this is a really early song book, probably 1876 or so, maybe even a little before. But you can come up, these are my personal things, so you can handle them. And this is one that's a little bit later. I didn't bring a current one, I should have. This is an early, original, first edition, that's what I should say. 1875, written by the Reverend Aaron Grange, who I mentioned as a founder. This book tells how the Grange was founded, why things are the way they are or were, as the case may be. This is a later, this was published in 1998 is a late history of the Grange. And this is a stamp. It's a plow on it. I can't find my Grange apron, or I would have brought it. But the men wore aprons, same as the Masons did. That's a carryover from the Masonic order. And they had a plow stamped on the front of their apron. And this is the stamp that would have made that. And it says on the plow, patrons, plow deep. I think that takes care of all of those. This is the newest manual. You're welcome to look at it. It's not secret. I have an old manual here. This is 1878. And at that point, they did the degrees for the men and women separately. There was, and since before 1900, it became one degree. For men and women, they took it at the same time. But in the early years, they did the men in one group, and the women in another group. And it takes a bit of a while to do it. I have seen it done that way. I went to in Minnesota is the farm that Oliver Hudson Kelly owned belongs to the Minnesota Historical Society. And in 2013, I believe, the youth were out there and they did the degrees, the separate degrees. And the wording is a little changed. Believe it or not, they have changed a few of the words. But it was interesting to see them do that. They were dressed in period fashion, and so interesting to watch and see them go through the degrees. The wording is a little different because they were separate. And so it was quite an experience. Let's see. I mentioned about visiting the museum. And I said, this is kind of the general overview. And I said, I like to close with these words from our installation of officers. Let us add dignity to our labor, and in our dealings with our fellow men, be honest, be just, and fear not. Whatever we do, strive to do well. Let us be quiet, peaceful citizens, feeding the hungry, helping the fatherless and the widows, and keeping us unspotted from the world. What a wonderful world we would have if everybody lived with those principles. So I'll ask you, if you got general questions on Grange, and then I'll tell a little bit about the women.
Is there any connection with the 4-H movement?
Yes, there was. And I will mention that in the women, because the woman that was involved in that I talk a little bit about. Yes, and you had your hand.
A charitable organization?
Pardon?
Charitable arm?
No. We do our own charity or community service within our own local area. I said occasionally there is an appeal, something like we have here, I can tell you from Cortland County, actually, they sent hay not a few years ago to wherever they'd had devastation. They sent some truckloads of hay, and Cortland County wasn't the only one who did that. And we sent, Ontario and Wayne County sent supplies up north when they had their devastating ice storm. So we do things like that, work together to, and I said, they have sent stuff out west at different times too. And I know in California where they're having those horrible fires, that some of the Granges have provided housing for people. They've opened their Grange halls to come in and stay. So, and they feed them and whatever, until they can get back on their feet or find a place to live, whatever the case may be, so.
How many Grange halls are left?
In New York,
Well, yeah, New York.
I cannot tell you how many. There are about 300 Granges, but not every Grange owns a Grange hall. So I can't tell you exactly how many. But I can tell you from personal experience, they are a difficult thing to keep up. And this membership is dwindling like all organizations. You can't get people to join. I said, I'm sure if you belong to the Legion or the Masons or the churches, it doesn't matter. You have trouble getting people to join. And I said, it falls to a smaller group to keep up Grange halls, and they are like this, big, cumbersome, and not cheap to maintain. So I said, you see a lot of them being sold because they cannot afford. I said, we had ours for 60 years or a little more, and we sold it a couple of years ago because we could no longer afford to maintain it. Yes.
How many members at the peak of the Grange did they have?
And that was in 1955, and I want to say it was like 800,000. It was a huge amount. Yeah, in the 1950s.
And the meetings like this Grange, would it be once a month, once a week, or how would they structure it?
It depended on the individual Grange. There's nothing in the bylaws that say how many times you had to, other than you're supposed to have 12 meetings a year. So I said a lot of Granges meet twice a month. Like my own Grange used to meet every week at one point. They had so many things going on, and that was in probably 1880s, 1890s. They were meeting every week. I said, we meet twice a month now.
You probably don't know the answer to this, but I mean, how many Granges are non-existent now?
Well, I can tell you if there's 300 Granges, the highest number we had was, I want to say 1,600 something. In New York State. I can't speak for the whole state. But here in New York State, there have been 1,600 plus Granges formed. And so we have about 300 left of those. But I always have to qualify that because in the 1870s and 80s, some Granges were formed. They might have existed for 6 months or a year and disbanded. There was not the interest, or they moved, or they were close enough that they went to another Grange. Like I said, there was 2 Granges in the town of Lyons where I live, and the one just was there for maybe 5 years and disbanded and joined with ours. And so I said that happened a lot in the early years. They were there for a little while and gone again. So all merged with another Grange. Yes. Anybody else got questions? Yeah.
There's been books written about Grange?
Yeah, I have 2 back there, and that's only 2 out of, I don't know how many. I was trying to think, I've probably got 6 at least on my bookshelf.
Good thing for PBS.
Yes. So, yeah. And, but it isn't, and I said I've only touched on a little bit of it. I certainly haven't covered everything. I said there's so much, we have contests, we have programs at every meeting. I served this lecture on everything but national level. Thank God.
We're on the national committee though.
Yes, I was on the National Lecturers Committee when I was state lecturer here in New York. So we do have programs and continue to have programs. We are always looking for, like this historical association, looking for programs, fun, interesting things. So Grange does the same. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about the women's role in Grange. Some of these items are from the Journals of Proceedings of New York State Grange in the early years. I happen to have a couple of bound copies of them, so I refer to them a lot when I'm looking up early history. And I'll start with 1875. Resolution asking the brothers, that's the men, to increase the opportunities for women outside the Grange as well as inside, offered by Mrs. N.B. Riggs and Mrs. D. Pratt of Wayne County. So those two women got up and made this motion or resolution, said this is what we want. In 1876, there were 5 women on the official delegate list. See, men kind of were running things, yeah. But I think this note is interesting. In 1879, wives of delegates to State Grange, that would have been the men, they were the delegates, could vote. The women of those could vote, but the husbands of women delegates could not. I thought there's a little reverse discrimination. So, in 1882, reaffirmed the previous year's resolution, and a resolution was approved in favor of political and civil government be made a special study of subordinate Granges, that if suffrage is extended to us, we, as patrons, may be able to vote intelligently. Also, that we labor to extend the education in this particular branch to those outside the order, thinking as we do that there are already too many ignorant voters in the field. We respectfully ask the adoption of this resolution. So, not only did they want the vote, they wanted the people to be informed, know what they were doing. 1894. Mrs. W.C. Gifford, Chautauqua County, introduced the first women's suffrage resolution in the National Grange while her husband was state master. She also wrote the memorial in favor of enfranchisement of women, which was adopted by New York State Grange and later submitted to the State Constitutional Convention of 1894. So she was a pretty smart lady, I would say, if she got it into the Constitutional Convention. And there's a few notes from National Grange. Long discussion over the pending vote in Congress for a federal amendment to the Constitution for universal suffrage. It was voted down, but National Grange unanimously passed, resolved that we declare unqualifiedly and emphatically in favor of women's suffrage. The women who joined Grange in the early days were of the middle class, literate and interested in the world around them. This class of women, and men too, was in evidence in my own Grange, as many of the early Grangers were businessmen, successful farmers, and professionals along with their wives. This also shows in the frequent writings in various Grange papers of the era. Within the Grange, women worked with the children through Junior Grange beginning in the 1880s. As lecturers, and that's the program director, would be known as the program director, or in a lot of organizations. Lost my place. As lecturers, they could influence the thinking of all by using the platform of the program. Many resolutions and social action came from these programs. women were in the majority in the office of the lecturer. And that has held true pretty much over the years. So I said, we still can tell them what we want. But that's how a lot of the resolutions, particularly regarding temperance and women's suffrage, came into being, is because it would start out as the lecture, part of the lecturer's program, and then it would become a resolution and go on through. And that's, the resolutions go through Grange, start on the local level. We're grassroots. We don't start at the top and work down. We start at the bottom and work up. So resolutions begin on the local level, go to the county Grange, if approved there, it's sent to state. If it's approved there, if it is a national issue, it goes to national Grange. Otherwise, the state Grange makes it part of their priorities and goes. We do a lot of sending messages to senators and assemblymen and to the Congress stating our position on various issues. The first woman lecturer here in New York was Mrs. S.N. Judd of St. Lawrence County, and served 2 years and was followed by another woman. Wayne County has had 3 who served as program chairman or lecturer of New York State Grange. They include Fern Palmer of the now closed Williamson Grange, myself, and my daughter Kay, that's with me tonight, my chauffeur. We are both active in other capacities in our hometown, and you will find that most Grangers, active Grangers, are also involved in a lot of other things in town. If it's like my town, you see the same people doing everything. I see people shaking their head. Must be the same here too. If you're active in one thing, you seem to be active in other things. I also served on the Lecturers Committee of National Grange for 4 years. My best friend, Pat Van Laer, was chairman of the Family Activities Committee for our state Grange and was also on the National Committee. Other women who deserve to be recognized on the national level too. At the Constitutional Convention in California, Jean Carr represented the state Grange and spoke on behalf of equal rights. That was in 1879. Meanwhile, in Colorado, Agnes Ludwig Riddle was secretary of the state Grange. A member of the advisory board to the State Agricultural College, Agnes was the first woman legislator in Colorado. History says Wyoming was the first state to grant voting rights to women in 1869. Colorado followed in 1893 and other western states in the 19-teens. And you find that true, that the West was generally more progressive in their thought than we back here in the state East. In 1895, Sarah G. Baird began a 17-year term as master or president of Minnesota State Grange. I don't know who would want to be master of a state Grange for that long, but she was. And here's about the 4-H. Another accomplished woman was Doris Stockman of Michigan. As a teacher, she had earned her bachelor and master of arts and worked towards a PhD. She was the first woman to receive an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from Michigan State. Dora also was on the State Board of Agriculture for 24 years. Her Grange career included 16 years as state lecturer. That's a heck of a long time to be a lecturer. While serving in that capacity, she formed what were called 4-leaf clover clubs for children. Her clubs became the basis for the 4-H clubs that we know today. Any other questions on that?
What's her name again?
Doris Stockman.
Stockman?
S-T-O-C-K-M-A-N. And we had a hand in forming Future Farmers of America, too. I didn't mention that in here, but, and if you ever notice, theirs is the same color as the local Granges, the blue and gold. And that's where that came from, because a lot of the Grangers helped with that too. Let's see. We must not forget Eva Sherwood McDowell of Wayne. Her husband Francis, as I said, was a founder, and he also served as treasurer of the National Grange. When he retired, she took over the position of treasurer and served for 26 years. In the 20th century, some of you may not know this, Eleanor Roosevelt was a member, as was her husband, in Dutchess County. She was known for her many endeavors, including work with the United Nations. So, I have to talk about a woman from my own Grange, Mildred Taylor, from Eureka in Lyons, is recognized for her political career. She even has a blue state marker in the town. Mildred was the first woman appointed to the powerful Ways and Means Committee in the Assembly. Her other firsts include the first to be elected a delegate at large at a National Republican Convention and chairman of a county Republican committee. And she attended many Grange functions in Lyons. In 1901, the Grange maintained a building at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. Mrs. B.B. Lord of Chautauqua County was in charge. More than 36,000 people visited the Grange quarters there, and Grange Day was celebrated on October 10th, 1901. This had to have been a huge undertaking, as the event ran for several months, and it was entrusted to a woman. And we complain about a week at the fair. So, although not a member, at least as far as I can find out, Susan B. Anthony was a friend of the Grange. She appeared at the 37th session of National Grange in Rochester in 1903. She admitted that she was able to, quote, recognize a Grange woman as far off as I could see her, because of her air of feeling herself as good as any man, unquote. New York, which is the seat of the Women's Rights Convention of 1848 in Seneca Falls, has yet to elect a woman master or president of New York State Grange. I'm sure that day will come.
You missed your chance.
I didn't want to, I know, I had a chance, I could have, I guess. There have been many women who have served as national officers of Grange. In 2015, however, history was made with the election of a woman as national president. Took them that long too. Betsy Huber of Pennsylvania was elected master or president. She is the first woman to serve in that capacity after almost 150 years. So she's a very nice lady, very smart, very capable. So, and I will end this quote from Walter Gifford, State Master President from 1890 to 94, who called the Grange, quote, the world's greatest equality club, unquote. So, questions?
Where's the Grange located at the state fair?
In, what's the name of the building? We used to have our own building there.
Yeah, I know, that was yours.
Yeah, and now we're in,
The horticulture, like in that area?
it's, boy, we are in the end of, and I don't honestly know what they call the building, actually. We're in the end of one of the buildings. We have a pretty big area. And we do programs every day there. And, yeah, somebody who's acquainted with the state fair probably knows the name of the building. And, but we have programs there every day throughout the fair. They also do a church service, which is really appreciated by many of the people who spend the 2 weeks there. And we generally take part in one of the parades, the dairy parade or whatever. So we do, and we do have the ox roast there. I don't know how many of you have ever ate at the ox roast. That's the Grange thing. We've been there since 1973. We got moved up the street this year, and I didn't get there because my companion had surgery, and I said I couldn't be gone all day, so I didn't get there. I don't know how well that worked out. Yes,
Is the Grange nonprofit?
yes. We are not, how do I want to say, a charitable, we're not a 501c3. There, I got to get the right numbers. But we have recently established a foundation where now we can accept larger donations, I'll put it that way. I said many Grangers will, give $20 or whatever to a local Grange or something. But we had no way of taking larger donations, and they have established a 501c3 foundation or whatever number it might be. I don't know if it's still C3, Lord only knows. I'm not involved in it that much, so I don't know, but I know now you can make large donations, leave some of your estate or whatever to that foundation now.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Early stage of the Grange organization, were the buildings owned by the Grange for the most part, or how did they work that? Like this building, was it owned by the Grange?
I can answer that.
I was going to say, I can't, and I was going to read that little bit about Fabius. Maybe you want to read it.
Well, this will
Yeah.
certainly help.
Yeah. This is what, I'll answer the question to the best of my knowledge. Some buildings were built specifically as Grange halls by a Grange. We have at least 2 in our county that was that way and are still in existence. But many times they bought a building, and in the early days, sometimes I think they just met wherever they could meet, whatever building in town might rent to them. And I have to go back and say, that when it was formed, it was a secret organization that was considered a radical organization because we had different thoughts than a lot of people. We were, especially where the women were concerned, no other organization let women in. Some churches even made them sit on opposite sides and so forth. But, so I think then a lot of them just met in whatever building they could rent. I said my own Grange didn't own a hall till 1951, I guess it was. We had always rented space in one of the buildings in Lyons, so it depended on the Grange. So, but I said the one Grange was built in 1889, I think, in Wayne County. It was an early Grange hall, and it's still in existence. The Grange no longer is there, but the hall is still there, and it is part of a historical little 3 corners, 2 corners, crossroads, whatever you want to call it. So I'll read you about Fabius Grange. This is the official directory and history of Onondaga County Granges, patrons of husbandry, 1957. And I brought this book along too. In fact, it's up here. But I'll read what it says about Fabius Grange, 1404. 45 brothers and sisters interested in promoting agriculture met in the Free Will Baptist Church on October 25th, 1916, with Deputy Master Josiah Betts, and organized the Fabius Grange. The members used the church for their meetings and reimbursed them by paying the taxes and making necessary repairs. So that's how they got their meeting place. Efforts were made to purchase the church property for a Grange home as early as 1917, but this was not accomplished until 1924, as no person or groups could be found with authority to make the transfer. That sounds familiar. The Baptist Corporation in Maine was finally contacted. A contract was made and the purchase was completed in 1924 for $700. Part of the principal was raised by subscription and the remainder borrowed from a local bank. Another loan was necessary to re-roof the building. The church bell was sold to the Vesper Church for $100. This money was used to reduce the note. A county-wide banquet was held in 1931, and the proceeds used to paint the Grange home. The Grange sponsored a dance on August 14, 1935, with great success. These proceeds were used to remodel the hall and apply on the note. In 1945, all 25-year members were honored, and the Grange gave $100 to the purchase of the doctor's house in town. Aid is given to the community service project. A very active juvenile Grange was organized at one time, but was forced to become inactive when it became difficult to find someone to be its matron or patron or leader, as they are known today. And it lists the past masters. Walter Knapp was the first master, and I'm not going to read them all, and it gives the list of the current officers for them. And on the next page is all the officers for that, or all the members in that year. So I was going to tell you who the secretary is because I did look that up. Let's see. Was a Mrs. B. Romley was secretary. I don't know if that rings any bells or not. Rowley. R-O-M-L-E-Y. Romley. Okay. I'll tell you the other Granges in Onondaga County is Excelsior 456, Marcellus 464, Taft Settlement 473, Lamson 588, and Baldwinsville, which is closed now. They closed this year. I would say Excelsior, Marcellus, and Taft Settlement were all formed within probably a couple of months of each other with their numbers that close. Because Granges are numbered starting with, like I said, with Fredonia number 1. And as they were formed, they were assigned a number. However, their certificate or charter came across the desk and was given a number. So that's, you can, when the numbers are close at hand, usually you can figure they were formed close. I don't know if you know Alan Henderson. He is steward of New York State Grange. Or Cindy Pollard, she's president of Onondaga Pomona Grange. If anybody's interested, I have their phone numbers here if you want to contact them for any reason. And I was trying to think, is there anything else you want to know? What else can I tell you? Yeah.
How often do you have visitors at the museum?
We're open by appointment. So I said, usually when there's a Grange activity, we're open down there. We get calls sometimes, and I know we had, somebody told me they were open because some people came from, I don't know where, but they were.
Yeah, I was wondering about how many times a year? 6?
Yeah, I would say that. We're open when we have our meetings. We meet a few times a year. We're usually open when we have some of the activities at headquarters, because that's just across the parking lot. And as I said, I'd love to have you come down, and I'll try to let you know when we're doing that in April.
Not really, but I live in Cortland. I've never seen it open.
Oh.
I've never seen anybody there.
Yeah. Well, we meet, our board of directors meets 5-6 times a year, so then, the headquarters, it's just, as I said, across the driveway. Yeah. Well, I said, we don't have anybody that can be there. And I said we do open when people call or whatever. We're fortunate we have a woman that lives fairly close by that goes down and opens it. And I said our museum in Lyons works on the same thing. We do have some stated days in the summer, but the rest of the time it's strictly by appointment. We're closed totally in the wintertime, so, because we can't.
A couple of fun things that I thought,
Yeah.
Carol, I might mention from our local Grange, because out of respect, that I look in the audience and I know that there are several children here of the parents that
I heard one woman say she found her mother's name in the roll book over there, news book.
absolutely. We have the membership book that
Yeah.
Peter was supposed to be here this evening, and he was the last master when the Grange closed. I don't have the exact day.
I was gonna find out, and I didn't do that. This is what she's talking about,
Yeah.
this book.
And then underneath the lace covering is the original charter that we have from the Fabius Grange that she's holding in her hand. And probably one of the women in the local Grange made the lace covering that has a sheath of wheat on one end and PHS on another end, and it is significant not only to the rug that's here on the floor, but you can see it better when she holds it up. And therein lies a lot of the history of why we shared to do the window that you see underneath the lights up above that was just restored last year. And so the sheath of wheat has a great deal to do with why we chose that.
Why don't you get that charter framed and hung up on this wall?
Because we just found it.
Oh.
That's one of my goals. And that's one of our intents to do. 1404.
What was I gonna say? I don't know, left my hand. Yeah, she was talking about this. This, I said, that symbol over there, or logo, whatever you wanna call it, the seven-sided, that represents the seven founders of the Grange. The sheaf of wheat, I don't know how many of you know what a sheaf of wheat stands for prosperity. Like the pineapple is hospitality, a sheaf of wheat is a symbol of prosperity. So Grange wanted all farmers to be prosperous, so sheaf of wheat is always shown in the logo, and that's not the only symbol or logo we've ever had. We've went through 3 or 4. So, but there's always been a sheaf of wheat in it.
It's very appropriate for how we chose to incorporate it in the window. This happens to be the Free Will Baptist Church that you're sitting in was one of our local carpenters, Matthias Berry, who built this building, and many of you have heard me talk about that before, but it's one of the things that I want Marty Bays and his daughter to look at is the picture of Master Howard Bays and Sister Clara Bell Bays. For those of us who came to many, many, many Grange meetings and sat quietly after we passed the secret code to get in the door,
Which we don't do anymore.
which they don't do anymore.
Yeah.
Clara Bell was the piano player, and I don't know if Marty knows for how many years, but all my life that I came here to maybe Carlina or Kay or some of them know, but my word, she played a piano like there was no tomorrow. And there were square dances, and there were oyster suppers, and there were dinners of every kind, and so there are several kids here who definitely know many of the folks that were past masters. Basil Conway, David Terrell, Grant Goodrich, Harry Locke, Lottie Paddock was an officer. I mean, there are just so many fun names that you will enjoy looking at, and we'll leave the book over there for you.
I was
to
gonna
look
say
at.
this one.
Okay.
What page is that?
115.
How many degrees are there in the Grange?
7.
7? My parents made it to the 4th.
Pardon?
My parents made it up to the 4th degree.
That's through the local community Grange, subordinate Grange. And, that's the ones I referred to as being geared toward, well, they're all kind of agriculturally related, but they're geared to the seasons and agriculture especially, so. Yep. Patrons of husbandry.
Patrons of husbandry, which is, I think it's even, yep, it's even
It's
on
even
the
on here.
book.
The official name is Patrons of Husbandry, the Grange. It's really the official name, so. But that's, any other questions or comments? Yes.
You mentioned GLF.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many stores there were in the county or in the state that were formed?
I have 2 books on the history of GLF, so I can probably find the answer. I can't answer it off the top of my head, but, no, I don't know off the top of my head, but I do have the book. And if any of you are interested, one of them is called What Went Before, and what's the other one? I can't think of the other one. What the title of the other one is. One of them's a thick one, and the other one is a smaller one. The smaller one was written by Tom Milliman. Maybe he was probably president, CEO, or something of GLF at one time, or that is a fascinating, I could do a whole program on GLF too. It had a fascinating history. And I said it's hard to believe that an organization, cooperative, company, whatever you want to call it, could be driven into the ground the way that was. So,
I always thought GLF stood for God Loves Farmers.
Oh, stood for Grange League Federation, because the Grange was involved, Dairymen's League, and the Farm Bureau Federation were the founders of it. Mhm. It was a co-op.
Well, we certainly are grateful that Carol has traveled from Lyons, New York, to join us this evening and to